All right, here we are for this week's market snapshot. What's happened in the last 7 days in Northern Virginia real estate in under 5 minutes. And a bonus, we have the the yearly month-over-month report for the month of February. The numbers are in. Here we go. Okay, so the first part of this report is our week market snapshot, which is a snapshot of the last 7 days. In the market snapshot, we are using what we call lead measures. In other words, they are data that we can use that is current, so we can make real-time decisions, versus lag data, which is number of sales, sales prices, and so on and so forth, because for a transaction to close and be considered sold and to use that data, a property has to be under contract for about 30 days. So if that property goes under contract on, let's say February 2nd, and it closes on March 2nd, it won't be considered into March's stats until at least March 31st, and then you have to wait until at least 10 days to make sure all the stats are in. So that transaction's actually close to 60 days old. Whereas these numbers are going to be what's happened in the last 7 days, so we can make real-time decisions. So this first graph here, this is our buyer activity, as Kelly likes to call it, our black squiggly line. This is buyer activity. These are the number of properties that went under contract in the last 7 days. And then our blue line down here is going to be inventory. In other words, the number of properties that came onto the market in the last 7 days. And you can see that the inventory increased slightly in the last 7 days, and buyer activity increased more sharply. So that increased this gap between the demand, the buyer activity, and the supply. So when you increase that demand, when we go down to our second chart here, you can see this, a normal market is right here in the middle, and anything below this normal market in which the supply would be higher than demand would be a buyer's market, and that would indicate prices coming down. Anything above that line is going to be a seller's market, so that means prices are going to be going up. So we can see that we are still in a seller's market. It's a little bit of an increase this week. It is a seller's market. It's a decent seller's market. But it's actually a little more favorable for buyers than it was last year, because if you look at this time last year, we were up in this area. And the reason for that is because the inventory is a little bit higher. This was last year's inventory, and this is this year. So we're a little bit higher in inventory. Buyer demand is about the same, maybe just a little bit lower, but that inventory is finally coming out there. So buyers, you have some choices, and you're going to be competing, but you're not going to be competing as hard because there are choices out there. So it's a good time for the buyers. And for sellers, your properties, as long as you price it right and you put it on the market and you stage it and you have it present well, you're going to get top market value and likely get multiple offers. So that's what's going on in the last 7 days here in Northern Virginia. So what that means for sellers, again, it's a good time to sell. We're starting to get into that spring market and see the activity picking up. For buyers, it's really a sweet spot right now, because if it follows the typical spring markets of past, we'll see that seller's market strength increasing as we go through the next few weeks. So that's what's happened with the last 7 days. So now let's dive into the monthly market report. So the monthly market report, and this is going to be for the month of February. The monthly market report, we're using lag data. So lead data, again, is your properties that went under contract, how many new properties came on the market. Your lag data is going to be properties that are sold, how many days on market, how many months of inventory, median sales price. They're all things that are calculated after the transaction happens. So we don't want to use this part of the market report for real-time decisions, but we want to use this part of the market report to see what the trends are, like broad scale. So it's like a bird's eye view to see what is the market kind of trending towards doing. So we're going to take a look at that. All right, so let me get over here. So the number of new listings for February of 2025 was 1,106. February of 2024 was 1,193. So the inventory was actually lower this last February. It was down 7.3% from 2024. The number of sales were 674, and in February there were 713. So the number of sales were down 5.5%. Well, that makes sense because the inventory was down 7.7%. So notice that the inventory was less, a lower number. A number of sales was a lower number, but the delta in that, because of the seller's market, the number of sales were not down 7.3%. They were only down 5.5%. In other words, the buyers were buying up more of the property. Days on market was flat. February 2024, same as February 2025. So days on market was the same. Months of inventory. So months of inventory is if you had all of the properties that were on the market at the current moment and no new properties came on the market and they kept selling at the pace that they were selling right now, how long would it take for that inventory to be eaten up, the absorption rate? And for February 2025, we were at 3 months, the same as 2024. Anything 5 to 6 months is considered a normal market. Anything above 5 to 6 months is going to be your buyer's market. Anything below is your seller's market. So still in that seller's market at this point. Next is the median sales price. So in February of 2024, it was right here, probably around 675, 676, somewhere in there. I don't have the actual number, but you can see where it was on the graph. In February of 2025, it was closer to 750. So I'd say that's probably 745, maybe 740. So it's an increase of 8.5%. So year over year in February, median sales price in Fairfax County, Virginia has gone up 8.5%. So all of these things that you're seeing about the market crashing, about the market dropping, they are not real-time data, and we're going to be breaking down these articles as you guys send them to us so that you can see what's actually going on. You can see right now we are still in a seller's market. Prices are still going up. It's not as aggressive of a seller's market as it has been in the past, but it's still a seller's market. All right, next we're going to go to the absorption rate. Actually, I'm going to go back over here. Median sales price is, it's the number that's used, it was used on this graph right here to determine the quote unquote house value. But what the median sales price actually is when they take all the data, it's the number that falls right in the middle. It's not the average, it's not there's no calculation, it's the number that falls right smack dab in the middle. So that's a good number to use when you have large samples because you're not being skewed by average with something really high or really low. It's just what falls in the middle. But the key to that, the problem with that is that if just because a median sales price may fluctuate up or down, it doesn't mean the home value has moved up or down. Now we're seeing home values going up, and that is happening, but sometimes you'll see a median sales price drop. But all that means is that that middle number was lower, and it doesn't mean that the house value was at a discount. So for example, in this month, month one, we have, I believe it's 9 or 10, I can't remember. I think it's 9. We have 9 houses here. They sold for these values. The middle was 500,000. Month number 2, again, 9 houses. The middle is 400,000. But if you look at these properties, all of these numbers are higher than month 1. And all of these numbers are higher than month 1. But if you look only at the median sales price, it looks like the housing market has dropped 20% because month 1 was 500,000, month 2 was 400,000. That leads people to believe that that $500,000 house is now only worth $400,000, and that is not always the case. In general, it's a good idea, but if you see in a small scale timeline that median sales price drops, it could just be that the higher price points weren't selling or something along those lines. Okay, so just keep that in mind with median sales price. Last number I want to look at is the sale to list price ratio. In other words, if a property goes on the market at let's say $1 million, does it go sell for above $1 million or below on average? So for February of 2025, they were averaging about 111% of asking price. So people were paying an 11% delta on the above asking price. February of 2024, we have April, March, February, they were only paying about 102 to 103%. So only 3% over asking price, now up to almost 11% over asking price. So we are in a seller's market. The market is not tanking, but it's still an opportunity for buyers because this number here could indicate that sellers are more reasonable. So they're going for higher prices. It could indicate that there's been a lot more competition on certain properties. It can indicate a lot of different things, but it just goes to show that sellers are getting what they're asking and above, and it is still a seller's market. All right, that is the market report for February of 2025 compared to February of 2024. We don't see any tendencies that are leaning towards us moving into a slower or a crashing market as we go into the spring, but we will keep an eye on it every week and see what happens. I know there's a lot of questions up in the air about the layoffs and everything, so we'll see how it affects it and just follow it. So stay tuned for our weekly market report so you know what's going on. All right, we'll see you guys next week.